Mark 12:41-44. Jesus sat down near the collection box in the temple and watched as the crowds dropped in their money. Many rich people put in large amounts, when a poor widow came and dropped in 2 small coins. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, "I tell you the truth, this poor widow has given more than all the others who are making contributions. For they gave a tiny part of their surplus, but she, poor as she is, has given everything she has to live on."
In 1983, a movie was released with comedians Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy called Trading Places. If you are looking for good, wholesome, family-oriented entertainment this holiday season, do not watch Trading Places. But the theme of the movie does inspire an interesting thought experiment. If you could trade places with anybody, who would you trade places with? If you could swap lives for a day or 2 or a week, who would you trade with? Seriously, take a second. Try to imagine somebody that you would trade places with if you had the chance. Got somebody in mind? Now, I'm imagining most of you chose someone who is richer, more famous, or more powerful than you are. And no judgment, I did too. But the fact that most of us probably imagined, if we could, we would trade places with someone wealthier, more famous, or more powerful than we are, I think it says something about the health of our spirituality. So this is week 4 of a series I've been doing called The Fire Inside. If you've not been here, the basic idea is, if you take kind of the religious overlay away, okay, so we don't need to talk about religion. Human beings are driven by desire. All human beings get up every day, and every single thing that you do for want of something. From a crying newborn to a workaholic adult, you are driven through life by desire. Now, if you want to put a religious overlay on top of that, you can just call desire the human spirit. Human beings are unique in our ability to imagine things being other than they are. And you do this 1,000 times a day. You imagine things being other than they are right now. And then you long for those alternatives to be made reality. That's the human spirit. So one of the suggestions I've made in this series is if you want to think about spirituality, everybody wants to be spiritual today, right? If you want to think about spirituality, one way to think about spirituality is what you do with your desire. It's what you do with the fire inside of you that kind of propels you through life. The question is your spirituality healthy? You are spiritual because you have a spirit. You have a spirituality because you are currently doing something with it. The question is whether or not it's healthy. And the suggestion that I made, and I got this from Father Ron Rolheiser in a book called The Holy Longing, healthy is measured by 2 things. One, it fills you with a sense of life, vitality. And by life, I mean you feel connected. You feel connected to yourself. You feel connected to other people. You feel connected to the universe, like things make sense. Life makes sense. Your existence has greater meaning, greater purpose, greater value. That's vitality. Your spirituality has to increase that for you over time. But it also has to hold your life together. So you think about fire, you need just the right amount. We've seen how too much fire, desire run rampant, not contained, not directed, and it just burns the forest down. And human beings do have a tendency to move in kind of a Promethean direction, where we think of ourselves as being, the end-all, be-all, and we can kind of do whatever we want. But there's the other direction to unhealthy spirituality, and that's when you have too little. Too little fire, you can't do anything with it. Can't heat anything, can't cook anything, doesn't provide enough light, enough warmth. And that's what I want to talk about today, is what happens when our spirituality is unhealthy in that direction, when we have too little fire. Now, what do I mean by too little fire? Well, to be clear, I do not mean that your life is not exciting enough. That is often the mistake, and I'll talk more about that in a second. When I talk about too little fire, what I mean is on some level, you think your life is not particularly significant. Or maybe at least not as significant as other people's lives. But the fact that most of us, if given the chance to trade places, we would choose to trade places with someone who is wealthier, more famous or more powerful than we are suggests that we've bought in a little more deeply than maybe we'd like to admit to the metrics of how our world defines significance. The world I live in says that if you are wealthy, famous, and powerful, you're significant, at least more significant than I am. The richer you are, the more famous you are, the more well-known you are, the more power you have, the more significant your life is. And the fact that I would trade places with someone, right? I didn't choose to trade places with someone who's poorer, less well-known, or less powerful than me, would suggest that I've probably bought into that narrative a little bit, or at least more deeply than I'd like to admit. And I imagine you have as well. But if that's true, if a human life is measured, if the significance of a human life is measured by your wealth, your fame, your power, most of the human beings who have ever lived on this planet will have lived entirely and completely insignificant lives. Wealth and fame and power are comparative terms. You can only be wealthy if other people are poor. You can only be cool if other people are not. That's the definition of being cool. You can only be powerful if there are people who don't have it. If everyone were wealthy, if everyone were cool, if everyone were powerful, those very terms would cease to have any meaning. And you can't have, and I hope you know this, you can never have equality of outcomes like wealth and fame and power. No matter how hard you try, you can never have equality of outcomes because you will never have equality of inputs. If you're a parent, you've experienced this, you can have two people born and raised in the same home, even if they have the same genetic material, raised by the same parents, and they can turn out wildly differently because they come into this world with totally different inherent potential. You can't have equality of outcomes like wealth or power or fame because you never have an equality of inputs. In this world, there will always be natural disparities amongst human beings because we're all different. We come into this world with different inherent potential. So if you live in a world that says the significance of a human life is measured by what you can accumulate or what you achieve or how many people know you, an infinitesimally small percentage of human beings will ever have a significant life. The rest of us will get up every day and on some level, even if you don't say it out loud, keeping in mind in Western culture, more and more people are saying it out loud. An alarming number of people in Western culture are getting up every day and saying, my life doesn't matter anymore. Even if you don't get to the place where you ever say that out loud, I'm suggesting that on some level, deep down, you feel it. You feel it probably a little more deeply than you would like to admit. I mean, most of our lives, let's just be honest. I mean, they're pretty not extraordinary by the world's standards of fame and wealth and power. I mean, we get up every day, probably roughly at the same time. We do roughly the same stuff. We probably eat like the same things. I grew up every day for lunch. I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, an apple, a bag of chips, a Twinkie, and a Capri Sun every day. I would still eat that every day if I could. You probably eat relatively the same things. You go to mostly the same places. You do mostly the same things. You show up to work on Monday and somebody says, how was your weekend? It's like, I mean, it's about the same as last weekend. I mean, we did some stuff and then we went to bed and we got up and did some stuff. I'm not trying to depress anybody, but this is the deal. You get up every day and you do mostly the same things, and by the world's standards, none of it's extraordinary. I mowed the lawn this weekend. I did the dishes. We went to a swim meet. I raked some leaves. Whatever the stuff is. And that's day after day, week after week, month after month. Now, we sometimes, we'll punctuate the monotony every now and then. We'll take a vacation, we'll have a date night, we'll go do something different. But even those things can have a little kind of routine rhythm to them. We vacation at the same spot. Our date nights have basically the same rhythm to them. It's just kind of how life goes. Most of us live a relatively ordinary, just kind of mundane by the world's standards, nothing extraordinary existence. I was watching a movie recently. It was one of these sci-fi flicks that Carrie hates, so I can watch it by myself. And there was like an army battalion, and they were the last line of defense, like an alien invasion or something. And the commander of the army, before the big fight, he's giving the rile up the soldier speech, and he basically says, most human beings will never come anywhere near affecting human history. And that's how I feel most days. Imagine if you gave yourself a minute to be honest, that's how you feel most days. You'll never come anywhere near affecting human history, at least not the way that the kind of world says is significant. Now, the conventional solution for most people seems to be to assume that my mundane, ordinary, nothing extraordinary existence, that the way that I deal with that is I add some excitement. The problem is my life is not exciting enough. And you can appreciate this. When you're young and you got your whole future ahead of you, it's like I can do everything. My parents always told me I was extra special, and I believed it. And so I can conquer the world. And then you get to a place where you go, okay, I don't know that anything big and fancy and extraordinary is going to happen at this point. I'm going to be married to this person, and I'm going to live in this house, and I'm going to work this job, and this is what we're going to do on our weekends, and that's what it's going to be. And you can get to that place where you start to feel like my once big, extraordinary, world-changing life is slipping away. And so the solution is to do something about that. And you can do something marginally unhealthy, like, buy yourself a sports car. You could do something really unhealthy, like have an affair. Maybe that's the problem. Shuffle the deck, redeal. People will find some way. You can go a religious route, sell all your stuff, move to Tibet. But you do those things and you realize none of them work. In fact, they do nothing but cause more problems, because the problem wasn't that your life lacked excitement. That was not the issue. The issue is that you did not have spiritual eyes to see significance where it already existed. And so you went looking for it in places where it does not. I think that's the read between the lines message in this text that you just heard a minute ago. The story starts, Jesus and his disciples, they go to the temple in Jerusalem, and they sit near the treasury box, and they watch people put in sums of money. So rich people come in, and they put in large sums of money, and then this poor widow comes in, and she chips in a couple of copper coins, which were basically worthless. It would have been the equivalent of like 6 minutes of a day's wage, like nothing. Now, typically, this text, if you've ever heard this text preached on before, typically this text gets used to talk about giving, as if that were its point. So the take-home message here is that you and I should give generously the way the widow did and not the way the rich people did. Right? The rich people, they're giving large sums, but the large sum is actually a small fraction of what they have. So it really doesn't cost them much. It's a big number, but for them, it doesn't ever put them in a place of risk or dependence. It's an easy give. The widow gives next to nothing. The money really even can't be used to keep the lights on. But it's significant in terms of what she has. So it puts her in a place of real trust and risk. So the conventional use of this text is, you and I should give more like the widow and less like the rich people. And that lesson is definitely there. I don't want to overlook it. Let's be honest. The numbers don't lie. Fewer and fewer people in Western culture are giving at all. And lots of people in Western culture, and this should be understandable, give in a way that doesn't really cost them anything. Meaning it doesn't ever put them in a place of discomfort. And that should make sense. If you live in a world where, at least practically speaking, God doesn't exist, then you're not going to give in a way where you have to trust a benevolent God to provide for you. What you're going to do is you're going to give in a way that makes you feel good about yourself, like you did something, but you're not actually going to have to depend on God to provide for you. I had someone just this week came and told me, we made a pledge to the building project and had absolutely no idea where that money was going to come from. We pledged money we did not have. That's giving like the widow. And it should be no surprise to anybody who's ever put themselves in that position. God miraculously provided in their life. And they were able to give what they pledged to give, having absolutely no idea how that was going to happen. So there is a lesson here about giving, but I want you to notice something. In this passage, Jesus does not say, go and do likewise. And it wasn't like Jesus was shy about doing that. He was perfectly happy to prescribe behavior. He tells the parable of the Good Samaritan, and he tells the religious lawyer, go and do likewise. He meets with a rich religious person one time, and he says, I want you to go sell all your stuff and give money to the poor. I mean, it wasn't like Jesus was shy about prescribing behavior, but he doesn't do that here. He doesn't sit with his disciples and watch the rich people come in and dump money, and then watch this poor widow come in and kick in some coins, and then look at his disciple and say, guys, she gave more, I want you to go and give like her. He doesn't say that. It does not mean that we should not emulate her behavior. It just means I think there's something more significant he's trying to get at here. This text on the surface may have something to do with giving, and it's often used that way, but I think there's something much more important going on here that Jesus is trying to get his disciples to see. And I think it has something to do with significance. Rich people come in, they put their large sums in the offering plate. How did Jesus know they were rich? I don't know, I suppose the way we know people are rich. Maybe the way they were dressed compared to the way everybody else was dressed. Maybe the carriage they rode in on compared to how everybody else drove. Maybe just reputation in town, like you just know the families that have got money. Oh, that's the guy that owns all that land, or you just kind of know. But if some of those material giveaways weren't there, they didn't have electronic giving 2,000 years ago. They didn't write checks. In fact, they didn't have paper currency. If you were rich enough to give a large sum of money, and of course, very few people were, if you were rich enough to give a large sum of money, you know how you gave it? Big sacks of coins. Big bags. There was no way to hide that you were rich. If you were going to give a large sum, you walked in with big bags of money, or maybe you put them in a cart, wheeling the cart down the aisle. Everybody knew that you were rich. It was unavoidable. And that was kind of the point. If you walked in with your big bags of money, everybody knew you were rich, and everybody would sit there and go, oh my gosh, how generous are those people? They're amazing. Thank God for them. Now, I ought to say there's something really healthy about this. The accountability of it, anyway. I mean, if you were someone who you're tempted to give large amounts of money so that other people will know that you gave large amounts of money, so that they will think you're awesome, Jesus' pastoral advice to you would be, give privately. Make sure nobody has any idea what you're doing, so they can't thank you, and nobody can think highly of you. Because that's the best thing for you spiritually. If what you're really after is people thinking you're awesome, that is not good for your soul. So if that's what you're giving money for, Give it privately so nobody knows. You can just as easily, this is why you can't mechanize this. This is a spiritual issue. You can just as easily bolster your sense of self-significance by giving nothing. If you live in a world where nobody knows what you give, like the world we live in, nobody knows what you give, you can show up to church, you can dress the part, you can sing the songs and pray the prayers and look the churchy person, and everybody will just assume, well, of course you're pulling your weight. You're a good Christian person. Of course you're giving generously and sacrificially, just like everybody's supposed to. Of course you're doing that. And because they don't know what you're giving, you can hide in that anonymity. See, in a system like that, it might actually be pastorally better for you to declare what you're doing so that you had a little more accountability in it. Either way, do you see the point? The point isn't money, and it's not giving, it's significance. It's how we derive our sense of worth. These people are bringing large bags of money into the temple, and they're putting them in the box, and they lived in a world very similar to ours in the sense that everybody assumed the more you've accumulated and the more you've achieved, the more significant your life is. You're the big important people, and everybody should pay attention to you because of how much you have and how much you've accomplished and how much you do. And that's exactly what they wanted. Our eyes have been trained to see significance in some places and to not see it in others. Where we see significance are the cool kids, the famous people, the people who have a bunch of money, and the powerful people. They're the significant ones. And we're either all chasing their life or on some level feeling like we're not as important as they are. Jesus didn't have to sit next to the temple treasury box. He could have sat anywhere. Mark specifically tells you he sat next to the box. You don't think he did that intentionally? Of course he did. He sat right there, knowing full well what was about to happen, so that he could observe it, not just in them, but in his disciples. You don't think his disciples were sitting in the room going, oh my gosh, they're so impressive. Look at the big bags of money. They're so amazing. And you don't think that when the poor little widow came in that they just sort of turned and started talking to each other and didn't even pay attention? This literally just happened. I just saw this on Facebook a couple days ago. The most famous violinist in the world travels all over the world, selling out auditorium. He makes millions and millions of dollars every year. I think his violin costs like $40,000. Just last week, he went into a New York subway tunnel and played all day long. Greatest violinist in the world. The violin he was playing is $40,000. He made $35 that day. Millions of people, right? If you're into classical music, you would pay hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars to go see him if he were in like an auditorium in Boston. But he's playing right in front of you on a subway tunnel and you walk right by him. Why? Because you're trained to assume he's not significant. You're significant if you're over there, but you're not significant if you're over here. That is what is happening in that temple, and it happens every single day. Everybody thought the rich people with the big bags, they were the significant ones, and a little poor widow who's kicking in money that's worth 6 minutes of a day's wage. She's not significant. There's nothing important about her life. You know, it's really interesting. The text that precedes the story that you heard, like literally, if you were reading this in Mark's gospel, the story that you just heard, here are the verses that come immediately before it. Ready? Beware of these teachers of religious law, for they like to parade around in flowing robes and receive respectful greetings as they walk in the marketplaces, and how they love the seats of honor in the synagogues and the head tables at banquets. Check this, verse 40. yet they shamelessly cheat widows out of their property and then pretend to be pious by making long prayers in public. Because of this, they will be more severely punished. And then, not coincidentally, you get a story about rich religious people and poor widows. Those big bags of money, yeah, they stole that. They stole it from her. And lots of other people like her. But when they show up with their big bags of money and put them in the offering plate, everybody's been trained to think they're the significant ones. They're the ones with the important lives doing the important things. Jesus is trying to get his disciples to see something that their world has trained them not to see. Not only are they not giving generously. You think they're giving generously. You just think that because the number's big. If you actually saw how much money they had, you would realize they're giving nothing. Not only that, it's not even theirs. They're giving stolen money, and you think they're the big shots. And yet here comes this little lady who's been a widow, and she has next to nothing to live on, and she's still giving, and giving comparatively way more. And you don't pay attention to that at all. See, Jesus is not talking about giving. This story is not about, he's not saying it's wrong to be rich and give big sums of money any more than he is saying it is inherently virtuous to be poor. This isn't about giving at all. It's about what we are trained to see as significant. Rich, famous, powerful people, they're the significant ones. The rest of us are not. Just by highlighting this woman's life and her behavior, what Jesus is teaching his people is no, she's significant too. The fact that she does nothing but get up every day, struggle to survive, and do her level best to love her God and live the way that she believes he wants her to live, that is significant. The fact that you get up every day. Here's the thing, guys. Your world trains you to, at best, overlook all of the monotonous moments of everyday life that are a significant expression of your humanity. Every day, you get up, you get dressed, you put gas in the car, you do some laundry, you vacuum the floor, you pay your bills, you give your kids a hug. You go to school and you study social studies. You do some homework, you play in a soccer game, you hang out with your family over the holidays, you listen to your kid tell you the same story for the 9th time. Your world trains you to overlook all of those moments as insignificant because they're not affecting history the way that the rich and the powerful and the famous do. At best. At worst, it trains you to resent those moments. I have to clean this kitchen again? I have to go to practice again? I have to learn calculus? I have to listen to this story for the 9th time? At best, your culture says all of those little everyday, mundane, ordinary, monotonous, lacking extraordinariness moments are things that you're just supposed to bypass. You do it. I was just talking to my daughter the other day. She says, I hate Tuesdays. I was like, what's wrong with Tuesdays? It was like Tuesday's just a day to get past to get to Wednesday. That doesn't make any sense. All of those little moments, every single day, all the stuff that you do that in the grand scheme of human life mean nothing, they are extraordinary. They are shot through with the glory of God because you are shot through with the glory of God. They are not moments to be overlooked, and they are certainly not moments to be resented, which I am guilty of all the time. They are inherently significant. The solution to us getting up every day and having all the things that we have to do, and your life can just become one giant to-do list of things that you get done, and you start feeling like, what am I doing? The solution is not to mix it up and make things more exciting. The solution is to put on new glasses, to see the world differently, to see your life differently. This quote's it's a little shop-worn, but I don't have a better one that gets at what I'm trying to communicate. This is from C.S. Lewis in his book, The Weight of Glory. This is what he says. It is a serious thing. It is a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses. To remember that the dullest and most uninteresting person you can talk with may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to worship, or else a horror and a corruption such as you now meet, if at all, only in a nightmare. There are no ordinary people. There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilizations, those are mortal. And they are to our life as the life to an ant. But it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. Immortal horrors or everlasting splendors. There is no ordinary life. Your life is not ordinary. It is extraordinary because it is shot through with the glory of God. That other person's life is not ordinary. It too is shot through with the glory of God. That other person's life is not more extraordinary than yours because they have more wealth, fame, and power. And your life is not more extraordinary than theirs because you have more wealth, fame, and power. The simple, ordinary, everyday, mundane warp and woof of human existence is splendid. It is extraordinary because you are made in the image of a glorious God. And that is the only way you can make a statement like that. Saying that every human life is extraordinary is not something that you can prove empirically. It's not a scientific fact. It is only something that is true if all the way down, all the way back, God. If you're made in the image of a good and gracious and benevolent, extraordinary God, that is what you are, all the way down. And the fact that God comes to be with us in ordinary, messy flesh and blood, the birth of a child, just the dirtiness of it, is a demonstration that all of humanity is divinized, shot through with the glory of God in everything that you do, from washing dishes to raising kids to going to college or whatever the stuff is. It's significant because you are significant. You are significant because God is significant. Not all spiritualities teach that. But Jesus did. Imagine how much healthier your spirituality would be if you believed him. We're going to finish our service this morning by taking communion together. You're going to come up here in a minute if you want. And you're going to take ordinary elements, bread and juice, stuff that we just take for granted every day, we look right past. But the God who created you, the God in whose image you're made, has endowed those ordinary gifts, bread and juice, with an extraordinariness, a significance, body and blood, that not only have real spiritual power to change your life, but it's a testament. It is a de facto declaration that the ordinary is extraordinary, that human life is shot through with the glory of God because of who God is. That by mingling your life with God's life with your life, that you can live up into the extraordinariness of what it is supposed to mean to be human. If that's what you want, the invitation is to come forward. come forward and put on spiritual glasses that shade all of human life in the extraordinariness that it's due because of the good and gracious God who's made it. In just a second, if you've not done this, I'm going to invite us all to stand. I'll dismiss you starting in the back rows. Come down our center aisle here. We have communion tables on both sides of our stage. I invite you to take a prepackaged communion cup back to your seat using the side aisles, and then just take that during this last song as you feel led. I invite you to stand. Let me pray for us. God, we thank you that there is no ordinary life. Our lives are not ordinary, neither are other people's. Forgive us for thinking that our lives are more extraordinary than others because we have more or have done more. Forgive us for feeling like our lives aren't significant because we haven't done as much or we don't have as much. Forgive us for striving after significance where it can't be found and failing to find it where it is. I pray that we would know that we are significant because you made us and you love us, that every aspect of our lives is an expression of the divine glory that you've given us. Help us to rest in that, to find encouragement in that, to find strength and power in that. We love you. We entrust ourselves to you this morning. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Searching for the way to go, stranger, heavy-hearted, longing for someone to know. May you find a light. May you find a light to guide you home. Weary travelers, searching everywhere you go. Strangers who are searching, longing deeply to be known. May you find a light. May you find may you find a light to guide you a light. May you find a light. May you find a light to guide you home.